Have you ever read a story so cursed that it vanished from your memory the moment you finished it? I'm not asking just to be dramatic. I truly want to know if you've ever experienced a tale that burrows so deeply under your skin that you can't tell if it's a dream, a memory, or something else entirely. I used to think such stories were urban legends, fiction made up by people with too much time on their hands. But after what happened to me, I'm not so sure anymore. My story, if I can even call it that, has haunted me for years. I can't remember all of it, and yet certain details stick like shards of glass in my mind. Even as I type this, my hands are trembling. Maybe I'm making a mistake by sharing it, but I have to get it out before it fades again. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. One of those places where everyone knows each other and every street corner has a story to tell. My parents owned a modest house on the outskirts of town, flanked by dense woods on one side and an abandoned lot on the other. My father worked at a local factory and my mother was a librarian, so books and bedtime stories were a big part of my childhood. I remember summer nights, sitting by the living room window, reading scary tales about haunted houses or ghosts that lingered on old dusty roads. It was thrilling in a childlike way, until something truly scary happened in real life. There was a boy in our neighborhood named Darren, though if you'd asked me about him a few years ago, I might have drawn a blank. It's like he vanished from my mind. He was around my age, maybe a year younger, with dark hair that always fell into his eyes. We used to play in my backyard and in the woods behind the house. I recall the flicker of fireflies at dusk and the crunch of leaves under our sneakers. Darren always seemed quieter than the rest of us. Sometimes I'd catch him staring off into the distance as though he heard a call from the trees, like he was waiting for something or someone. For years I didn't think about Darren at all. Life happened. My family moved away after my father lost his job. I went to college, got a desk job, and basically forgot about that old neighborhood. Then, about 6 months ago, I started having strange dreams. They began innocently enough. I was a kid again, running through the woods, laughing, chasing fireflies with a friend whose face was blurred. But then the dreams grew darker. The laughter turned into sobs, and the face of my friend started to come into focus. Dark hair, pale skin, and a hollow gaze that made my stomach twist in fear. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. At first, I dismissed the dreams as random. Maybe I'd seen a movie that triggered old childhood memories. But then one day, while sorting through a box of keepsakes in my attic, I found an old Polaroid. It showed me and another kid, Darren, sitting on a tree stump in the woods. My mother's handwriting on the back read, "You and Darren, summer of 1998. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours, unable to recall who he was or why I had never mentioned him to anyone. The moment I held that picture, something shifted in me. It was like a cold gust of air passed right through my chest, stirring up all the dust and cobwebs in my memory. That night the dreams got worse. I saw Darren standing in the shadows at the foot of my bed, pointing toward the window. In my dream, I got up and followed him outside into a moonlit backyard, except it wasn't the yard of my current home. It was the yard of the old house I grew up in, the same one by the woods. The trees were taller than I remembered, their branches twisting like arthritic fingers. I heard a soft whisper of my name, and then I saw Darren vanish into the tree-line. I ran after him, my bare feet sinking into the damp earth, heart hammering in my chest. When I caught up to him, he turned around slowly. His eyes were wide, his pupils too large, and he said just one word, "Remember." I jolted awake in a panic, nearly falling out of bed. The clock read 3:33 a.m. My mouth was dry and my head felt heavy. I grabbed my phone, fumbling in the dark, and found myself scrolling through social media trying to calm down. But something about Darren's voice wouldn't let go. It wasn't just a dream, it felt more like a warning, or maybe a plea. I decided I needed answers. The next day, I called my parents, who now lived a few states away. I asked them about Darren. There was a long silence on the line before my mother finally spoke. She sounded hesitant, as though she'd been waiting for this question but dreading it at the same time. "Yes," she said quietly. "Darren was your friend, for a while. Something happened though. It's complicated." "What happened?" I asked, pressing the phone harder against my ear, trying to read the tone in her voice. Why did we lose touch? Why did I forget about him? There was a moment of static, or maybe it was just my own heartbeat roaring in my ears. My mother let out a soft sigh. "He disappeared. No one knows what happened to him. He was declared missing the summer after you turned 10. You were both in the woods playing and you came back alone. You said you didn't remember anything. The police searched for weeks, but he was never found." I felt like the ground was pulled out from under me. My mother's words echoed in my mind, weaving with the memory of that Polaroid. Darren missing? And I was the last one to see him? It made no sense. How could I forget something so monumental? I asked my mother if there were any news articles about it, or any mention in local papers. She said she wasn't sure. The entire town had been hush-hush about the incident, as if no one wanted to talk about it. But she remembered how distressed I had been, nightmares, sleepwalking, and eventually the move to a different town to help me start over. That revelation rocked me to my core. A missing friend, a chunk of my childhood wiped from memory, and now these dreams calling me back to that same place. I realized then that I needed to return to my old hometown. Something was pulling me there, a force that wouldn't let me rest until I faced it. So I booked a few days off work and packed a small suitcase. The drive took about 6 hours, the highway gradually giving way to narrow roads lined with old farmhouses and open fields. By the time I arrived at the outskirts of my childhood town, the sun was setting, casting long eerie shadows across the landscape. I found a small motel on the main road. The neon sign flickered ominously as I parked my car. It was the kind of place that looked like it had been built in the 1960s and never updated, brown carpets, buzzing fluorescent lights, and a stale smell of cigarettes. Exhausted from the drive, I tried to sleep, but the nightmares came back. Darren's face hovered behind my eyelids, his voice echoing that single word, "Remember." I woke in a cold sweat, panting. Outside, the motel sign buzzed like a trapped fly. The next morning, I went straight to the local library. It was a modest building with creaking floors and shelves packed tight with old books. I asked the librarian if there were any newspaper archives from around the time Darren went missing. She looked at me with a hint of suspicion. Nobody asked for that stuff anymore apparently, but she pointed me to a back room where dusty boxes of microfiche reels were stored. I spent hours there, scrolling through old newspapers, scanning headlines for anything about a missing boy. Finally, I found a small article dated July 15, 1998. Local boy missing near wooded area. Police search continues for 10-year-old Darren Hall, last seen playing near the forest off Millhaven Road. His friend, whose name is withheld for privacy, reported that Darren ran ahead into the trees and did not return. The search has yielded no significant leads. Residents are advised to avoid the woods until further notice. I read it over and over, my stomach twisting into knots. The article was brief, offering no further clues. The next few days' papers had only short updates, each more pessimistic than the last. No sign of Darren was ever found. It was like he'd disappeared into thin air. Something about the situation felt deeply wrong. The words "ran ahead into the trees" echoed in my mind. I kept imagining the moment when Darren supposedly vanished. How had I completely forgotten that? Feeling more unsettled than ever, I decided to visit the old house. It had been years since I'd seen it and I wasn't even sure if anyone lived there now. When I drove up, I saw that the property was abandoned. The front yard was overgrown with weeds, the paint was peeling off the walls, and the windows were boarded up. The sight of my once cozy childhood home in such a state of decay made my heart sink. I parked along the curb and climbed out, stepping over cracked pavement as I approached the front door. My breath caught in my throat when I realized the door was slightly ajar. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with dust and mildew. Memories flooded back. The living room where I'd read stories, the kitchen where my mother cooked dinner, the hallway that led to my old bedroom. But now, everything was stripped bare. No furniture, just empty rooms that smelled like rotting wood. As I wandered deeper into the house, I felt a creeping sensation that someone was watching me. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. Then I heard a soft creak, like a footstep on the floorboards behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was no one there. I decided to head out to the backyard, to the woods, even though my nerves were screaming at me to leave. The back door was stuck, swollen by years of moisture, and I had to shove it with my shoulder to get it open. A wave of nostalgia and dread hit me as I stepped onto the crumbling porch. The backyard was almost unrecognizable. Overgrown grass, tangled vines, and tall weeds had taken over. Beyond it, the woods loomed, dark and foreboding. A sense of déjà vu rippled through me. This was the place where Darren and I used to run around, the place where he supposedly vanished. My feet carried me to the edge of the woods before I realized I was moving. I felt drawn in, as though an invisible thread pulled me forward. With each step into the forest, the light dimmed. The canopy of leaves overhead was dense, letting in only scattered beams of sunlight. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. Even the birds seemed to avoid this place. The air was damp, and the smell of moss and decaying leaves wrapped around me like a wet blanket. Then I heard it, a faint whisper of my name. "Come closer." I froze. My mind raced, trying to rationalize. Perhaps it was just the wind or my imagination. But it sounded so real, so close. Heart pounding, I pressed on, drawn by that voice. After a few more steps, I saw a clearing up ahead. In the middle of that clearing stood a single dead tree, its bark blackened as if struck by lightning. At the base of the trunk lay something that made my skin crawl. It was a tattered piece of cloth, faded but unmistakably part of a child's shirt. I knelt down to pick it up, my hand shaking. As soon as my fingers brushed the cloth, an image flashed in my mind: Darren and I, standing in this very spot. He was wearing that shirt, blue with a little patch of a dinosaur on the sleeve. In the vision, he looked at me, eyes wide with terror, before something in the woods yanked him back. I heard him scream, and then I saw darkness. The vision vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving me breathless and shaking. I dropped the cloth as if it burned my skin. Suddenly the wind picked up, rustling the leaves. The dead tree's branches groaned like an old door hinge. And then I heard a whisper again, louder this time, but I couldn't make out the words. My heart thudded in my chest. I glanced around, my eyes straining to see if someone was there. The whisper came again, and I realized it was coming from behind the tree. I swallowed hard, every instinct telling me to run, but I forced my legs to move forward. Rounding the tree, I saw an old rotted wooden door set into the ground, partially hidden by fallen branches. It looked like some kind of storm cellar or root cellar entrance, though I had no memory of it ever being here when I was a child. A heavy padlock hung from the latch, but the wood around it was so rotten I could probably break it if I tried. My entire body trembled as I reached for the door. This felt wrong, deeply wrong, like I was crossing a threshold that shouldn't be crossed. But the curiosity and the strange compulsion to remember outweighed my fear. I kicked at the rotten wood, and the latch gave way with a loud crack. The door swung open, releasing a cold gust of air that smelled of damp earth and something else, something sour and decaying. Peering into the darkness, I saw a narrow staircase leading down. The steps were made of crumbling stone, slick with moss. I flicked on the flashlight of my phone and shone it into the abyss. The beam of light revealed a tunnel-like passage that seemed to extend farther than the yard should allow. A wave of dread washed over me, but I found myself descending step by step, heart hammering, mind screaming to turn back. The air grew colder with each step, and the silence pressed in on me from all sides. At the bottom of the stairs, the tunnel opened into a small chamber. The walls were lined with strange symbols carved into the stone, intricate spirals, triangles, and shapes I couldn't name. In the corner there was a crude wooden chair, and next to it lay old toys, a wooden top, a broken slingshot, and a ragged teddy bear missing an eye. My breath caught in my throat when I recognized the teddy bear. It was mine. I hadn't seen it since I was a child. I knelt and picked it up, my fingers tracing the missing eye. Suddenly, a memory surfaced. Darren and I playing in my room, the teddy bear falling off the bed, Darren picking it up and saying, "He's hurt. We need to fix him." A sob rose in my chest, tears prickling my eyes. I couldn't wrap my head around why my old toy was down here. Then, something in the darkness moved. My flashlight beam caught the flicker of motion. I gasped, nearly dropping the teddy bear. There was a shape at the far end of the chamber, small, hunched. It looked like a child. I could see the outline of a frail body, arms drawn in tight, head bowed. My blood turned to ice. I called out in a shaky whisper, "Darren?" The figure didn't move. Slowly I approached. My footsteps echoed in the chamber. The figure remained motionless. As I got closer, I noticed the tattered remains of a blue shirt with a dinosaur patch on the sleeve. My heart felt like it was about to explode. This was Darren. He was here in front of me all this time. But something was off. His skin was too pale, almost gray. His hair hung limp around his face. I reached out a trembling hand and gently touched his shoulder. He felt cold, like he'd been sitting in an ice bath for hours. When he lifted his head, I almost screamed. His eyes were sunken, the irises nearly black. His cheeks were hollow. He opened his mouth to speak, but his voice was a dry rasp, like leaves skittering across pavement. "You came back," he croaked. A rush of guilt and sorrow washed over me. "Darren," I whispered, tears spilling down my cheeks. "What happened to you? I've been looking for you. I didn't remember. I'm so sorry." His eyes locked onto mine. There was a mixture of anger, longing, and something else, something inhuman. "You left me," he said, his voice trembling with rage. "You went home, but I never did." He slowly got to his feet, his limbs stiff like a marionette's. My flashlight flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. I tried to apologize, to say something, but my mouth wouldn't form the words. Suddenly Darren's face twisted in pain and he clutched at his head. A horrible wail filled the chamber, reverberating off the stone walls, making my eardrums throb. That's when I saw them. The symbols on the walls began to glow faintly. They pulsed with a sickly green light, illuminating the chamber in an otherworldly glow. Darren's eyes rolled back and he collapsed to the ground, convulsing. Panic shot through me. I dropped to my knees beside him, not knowing what to do. The symbols' glow intensified, and I felt a pressure in my chest, as if invisible hands were squeezing my lungs. Darren's convulsions stopped abruptly, and his body went limp. For a second I thought he was dead. Then, with an unnatural jerk, he rose to his feet as if pulled up by puppet strings. His eyes snapped open, black and glistening. His lips curled into a grin that was all wrong, too wide, too forced. "It's not Darren anymore," the voice that came out of his mouth hissed. The voice was layered, echoing as though more than one entity was speaking. My mind reeled. I scrambled backward, nearly slipping on the damp floor. The thing that looked like Darren advanced on me. "He called for help," it said, but no one came. The forest claimed him. And now, I claim you. A primal terror seized me. I managed to stagger to my feet, shining my flashlight at the thing's face. It recoiled slightly, hissing, but then continued forward. My mind raced. I needed to get out of here, but I also couldn't just leave Darren, if that was still Darren at all. My heart hammered as I remembered the old stories about malevolent spirits that lurk in the woods, about how they sometimes latch onto children, twisting them into something else. Was that what happened here? I backed away, heading for the stairs. The creature that wore Darren's face let out a shriek that rattled the walls. It lunged for me, but I dodged, nearly losing my balance. My foot caught on a loose stone and I fell hard, the impact jolting my flashlight from my hand. It rolled across the floor, the beam now illuminating the wall carvings. The glow of the symbols flickered, and the creature snarled, momentarily disoriented. Summoning all my courage, I scrambled to the flashlight, grabbed it, and aimed it directly at the creature's eyes. With a roar, it stumbled back, raising its arms to shield its face. Seizing the opportunity, I dashed for the stairs, taking them two at a time, not caring if I slipped. My lungs burned, my legs felt like lead, but adrenaline pushed me forward. The tunnel seemed longer on the way back, as though it was trying to keep me trapped. Finally, I reached the cellar door. Daylight was still shining through the opening. I hauled myself up and out, slamming the door behind me. I heard a furious pounding from the other side, followed by that layered voice screaming my name. Without thinking twice, I ran back through the woods, branches scraping my arms and tearing at my clothes. When I burst into the overgrown backyard, I was gasping for air. My vision blurred with tears and exhaustion. The house loomed before me, silent and decayed. I hurried through it, out the front door, and collapsed on the sidewalk, my body trembling uncontrollably. It felt like I was going to pass out. After a few minutes, I forced myself to stand. I stumbled to my car, fumbling with the keys until I managed to start the engine. My only thought was to get as far away from that place as possible. I drove aimlessly, my mind a whirlwind of terror and confusion. At some point, I pulled over to the side of the road to catch my breath. My phone buzzed. It was my mother calling. I almost didn't answer, but a strange compulsion made me pick up. Her voice was frantic. "Honey, are you okay? I just had the strangest feeling, like something bad happened. You have to leave that town. Come home." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. I know. I'm leaving. There's something in the woods. It's not Darren. He's gone, Mom." My voice cracked on the last word and I broke down, sobbing. She tried to console me, telling me to come to their place, to forget about this nightmare. But how could I forget? The weight of the truth pressed on me. Darren had been trapped down there for years and something else had taken over his body. I ended the call and just sat there, the engine idling, tears running down my face. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I couldn't stop seeing Darren's hollow eyes, hearing that wail echo in my ears. A creeping thought entered my mind. Had I somehow been responsible for his disappearance? My mother said I came back from the woods alone, claiming I didn't remember. Did I abandon him there? Or was there something else, something so horrific that my mind blocked it out? Unable to leave without some form of closure, I found myself driving to the local police station. I wanted to tell someone, to show them where Darren was, or at least what was left of him. But as soon as I pulled into the parking lot, my rational mind kicked in. What would I say? "Officer, my childhood friend went missing 2 decades ago, but I found him in a secret cellar in the woods possessed by an ancient evil." I'd be locked up in a mental ward. Still, I mustered the courage to go inside. I asked if I could speak to someone about a missing persons case from 1998. The officer on duty gave me a puzzled look but directed me to a back office. I explained as calmly as I could that I was the friend who last saw Darren Hall. The officer typed something into a computer, then frowned. "There's no record of a Darren Hall missing in 1998, he said flatly. My stomach dropped. "But I found newspaper articles. The case was in the archives," I insisted. He shook his head. "We have digital records going back to the early 90s. If there was a case, it should be here." He turned the screen toward me. There was no mention of Darren Hall, no mention of a missing child. It was as if the entire thing had been erased. I felt like I was losing my mind. "Check the microfiche archives," I pleaded. He raised an eyebrow, clearly thinking I was unhinged, but he led me to a small records room. We searched through old files and microfilm reels, but found nothing. No articles, no police reports, nothing. I stumbled out of the station in a daze. How could the official record be gone when I had literally held a newspaper article about it just hours before? My mind reeled with possibilities. Was there a cover-up? Or was the entire town under some kind of curse that wiped away any trace of Darren's existence? The more I tried to piece it together, the more confused I became. I felt a suffocating paranoia, like I was living in a distorted reality where the rules kept changing. Desperate and exhausted, I returned to my motel room. The moment I walked in, I noticed something was off. The door to the bathroom was ajar and the light was on. I was sure I'd turned everything off when I left. Cautiously I stepped inside. The room smelled damp and there were muddy footprints on the carpet, leading from the door to the corner near the bed. My blood ran cold. Had someone been in here? My heart hammered as I followed the footprints. They stopped at the foot of the bed and there, on the floor, lay the tattered piece of blue cloth with the dinosaur patch. I nearly screamed. That piece of cloth had been in the cellar with Darren, or that thing wearing Darren's face. How did it get here? Suddenly the bathroom light flickered. I turned, shining my phone's flashlight into the small bathroom. The shower curtain was drawn. My stomach knotted. Slowly I reached out and pulled the curtain aside. The tub was empty, but scrawled on the tile wall, in what looked like muddy water, was a single word: remember. A surge of nausea overwhelmed me. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet. Something was toying with me, following me. This was no coincidence. My mind flashed back to that unnatural shriek, the black eyes, the rotting cellar. The entity that took Darren was free, and it wanted me to fulfill some dark purpose. Or maybe it just wanted me to suffer, to face the guilt I'd buried for so long. I grabbed my bag and bolted from the room, not even bothering to check out at the front desk. I jumped into my car and tore out of the parking lot, my heart in my throat. Night was falling as I drove aimlessly through the winding roads of the town. I needed to get away, but every road felt like it was leading me in circles. The street signs seemed unfamiliar, the landmarks changed or gone. It was as if the town itself was shifting, refusing to let me leave. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating gnarled trees that looked like skeletal hands reaching for the sky. A dense fog began to settle, reducing my visibility to just a few feet. Anxiety clawed at me. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Darren's figure in the back seat. After what felt like hours, I spotted a sign for the highway. Relief washed over me as I turned onto the on-ramp. The tension in my shoulders began to ease. But just as I was about to accelerate, the engine sputtered. The car lurched forward and then died, leaving me coasting to a stop on the shoulder. I tried the ignition again, but it only clicked. My phone's battery was down to a sliver, barely any signal. Of course it had to happen now. I stepped out of the car, the cold night air stinging my face. The fog was thicker here, swirling around me like ghostly dancers. The highway was deserted, not a single car in sight. I debated calling a tow truck, but my phone had almost no battery. Maybe I could walk to the nearest gas station. I grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and started walking along the roadside. The fog made every shape and shadow loom larger than life, and the quiet was unnerving. Then through the haze I heard it, a faint sound of footsteps behind me. I whirled around, shining my flashlight into the fog. Nothing. My heart pounded. I continued walking, each step accompanied by the faint crunch of gravel under my shoes. The footsteps came again, closer. My skin prickled. "Who's there?" I called, my voice echoing in the emptiness. No answer. The footsteps stopped. I turned back and kept moving, my pace quickening. Then I heard it again, right behind me, so close I could almost feel breath on my neck. I spun, flashlight in hand. The beam fell on a shape standing a few feet away. It was Darren, or what used to be Darren. The same pale face, dark hair, black eyes reflecting the flashlight beam. He stood there in the middle of the highway, the fog curling around his ankles. My breath caught in my throat. "Please," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. Leave me alone. He tilted his head, a grotesque smile twisting his lips. You can't leave, that layered voice rasped. You have to remember. You have to finish what you started. My mind raced, trying to recall what I had started. Was this about the night he disappeared? Was there something else I'd forgotten? As I backed away, I stumbled, falling to my knees on the rough pavement. Darren's figure moved closer, his steps slow and deliberate. In a sudden flash, I remembered more. We were in the woods that night, daring each other to explore a small clearing rumored to be haunted. We found that cellar door partially hidden, and Darren insisted we open it. I was too scared, so he went in alone. He screamed and I ran, leaving him behind. My stomach churned with guilt and horror. I had abandoned him. And by the time I told the adults, I'd blocked the memory from my mind out of sheer terror and shame. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, I'm sorry. I was a kid. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. The thing that wore Darren's face stopped in front of me, looming over me like a specter. Its eyes flickered with an otherworldly light. Now you know, it said softly. Now you remember. But it's too late. Before I could react, Darren's form lunged at me. His cold hands clamped around my wrists with unnatural strength. I tried to fight back, but he overpowered me easily, as though feeding off my fear. A chilling numbness spread through my arms, and I felt my consciousness slipping like I was being pulled underwater. My vision blurred, and all I could hear was the roar of my own heartbeat, mingling with the hiss of that inhuman voice. Suddenly, headlights appeared through the fog, bright and startling. Car was coming. Darren's grip loosened. The approaching vehicle screeched to a halt, and a man jumped out, yelling, Hey! Are you okay? The figure of Darren let out a shriek and vanished into the fog, like smoke on the wind. The man ran over to me, helping me to my feet. What happened? He asked, concern etched on his face. I glanced around, my head spinning. Darren was gone. The night was quiet again, as if nothing had happened. My arms felt bruised, and my mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. The man offered to drive me to the nearest town. In a daze, I agreed. We got into his car, and I stared out the window, half expecting to see Darren's shape materialize again in the fog. But there was nothing. The man asked if I needed a hospital, but I just shook my head, muttering something about a breakdown. He didn't push me, thankfully. After a short drive, he dropped me off at a 24-hour diner near the highway exit, where I called for a tow truck to get my car. As I waited, I stared at my reflection in the diner's window. I looked pale, haunted, like someone who'd just crawled out of a nightmare. Eventually, my car was towed to a nearby mechanic, and I spent the rest of the night in the diner, nursing cup after cup of lukewarm coffee. Dawn broke over the horizon, and with it came a strange sense of clarity. I realized I had to leave. Not just the motel or the old house, but the entire town for good. There was nothing left for me here except ghosts and guilt. Darren was gone, taken by something in that cellar. And I couldn't save him. I had to live with that. By noon, my car was fixed, and I started driving, heading away from that cursed place as fast as I could. The road seemed normal again, the fog lifted, and the signs were exactly where they should be. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Darren, but it was just me, looking exhausted and hollow. Part of me wondered if I should warn someone, tell them about the cellar, about the evil that lurked there. But the police didn't believe me, and the records were gone. Would anyone believe a word I said? I made it home that evening, collapsed into bed, and slept for nearly a day. When I woke, it felt like a dream, except the bruises on my wrists were still there, and the memory of Darren's black eyes was seared into my mind. I tried to go back to my normal routine, burying myself in work and mundane tasks. But every night, I dreamed of that cellar, of the dead tree in the clearing, of Darren's hollow face. The guilt gnawed at me. I started researching old legends, folklore about forests that consume children, or spirits that lure the unsuspecting. I found vague references to an ancient entity that feeds on fear and regret, but nothing concrete. Weeks turned into months. I felt like I was living two lives. My daytime life, where I functioned well enough to fool coworkers and acquaintances, and my nighttime life, where the nightmares and guilt consumed me. Then one night, I woke to find muddy footprints leading from my front door to my bedroom. On the wall, written in dripping water, was that single word again, remember. I realized then that there would be no escape. Darren's fate, that entity's presence, my own guilt, they were all intertwined. I had read a story that was so cursed it disappeared from my mind. But now it had come back, and it was never going to let me go. So here I am, writing it all down, hoping that by sharing this cursed story I can somehow lift its hold on me. But be warned, if you're reading this, you might feel that same pull, that same compulsion to look into the shadows of your own past. Maybe you'll feel a chill when you pass by an old, boarded-up house or catch a glimpse of movement in the corner of your eye. And if you do, remember Darren, and remember that some stories are better left untold. Because once you open that door, once you remember, there's no going back. Now, I have a question for you. Have you ever felt like something from your childhood was calling you back, even when you didn't want to remember? Let me know in the comments. I'll be waiting, or perhaps something else will be waiting instead.